Well, Kamala Harris delayed her flight from Singapore to Hanoi, Vietnam, because of a mysterious syndrome called Havana syndrome. So, this is something that popped up, if you remember, in Cuba back in 2017. It was making the news that something was making US diplomats very, very sick. They were hearing loud ringing sounds that sounded it's loud, very annoying sound in their ears. They were getting pressure headaches, dizziness. Some of the kids in their families were getting nosebleeds. It was this very bizarre syndrome that started off with a couple of CIA agents. They were the first to report it to the medical clinic inside the U.S. Embassy in Havana, Cuba. And, probably the medical workers thought, what are these CIA agents into? Who knows what they're exposed to? Probably something weird. So maybe that's what the deal was. And they kind of said, well, I don't know. But then once these US diplomats started showing up and saying, I got these weird sensations and things going on, and I don't know what's happening, the medical staff started to say, something is very strange. We need to be more on alert. Something is happening. And then the Canadians, right? The Canadians, whoever wants to harm the Canadians, they came along and said, we've got some weird symptoms that are happening to us. The Canadian embassy started to report it as well. And so this really bizarre illness that ended up affecting over 30 people in Cuba really was this big mystery in 2017. Nobody knew what was causing these strange symptoms. They were thinking, was this something environmental, chemical? And then they thought maybe this is an attack. Maybe there's some sort of sonic or radio frequency microwave attack going on from the Cuban government to the Americans and even the Canadians. And the Canadians were like, oh, no, it's not us. Nobody wants to attack us. They're only coming after us because we're sitting next to you guys. So the Canadians actually moved their people away. They tried to distance themselves from US diplomats and house them together in a way. So Donald Trump at the time, president, points the finger at the Cuban government. Rex Tillerson also pointing the finger at the Cuban government. Everybody's wanting to know what was going on in Cuba. Was there some sort of an attack? And so they ended up calling everybody back home. They said, that's it. We're just abandoning ship. Everybody get out of Cuba, come home. And they issued warnings to Americans who were traveling to Cuba. So it was this really bizarre sort of syndrome that was going on. And people at that point, a lot of us that were very skeptical, of course, of the narratives coming from the CIA and the government thought, oh, here it is. Finally, a Castro is going to no longer going to be in office in Cuba. You're getting somebody else. And so in order to continue this charade of this embargo on this country and keeping them down, you're going to claim that they're attacking you. Like that's, of course, par for the course, right? That the U.S. would make these claims, call everybody back home, fear-monger the Cubans, make it something's their fault, and it's really probably something you made up or you guys did to yourselves. Well, that seemed like a possible likely story, right? But the issue was more of these reports started to surface all around the world. Suddenly, diplomats in China started to have the same strange sensations, the same illness. A couple of diplomats in China ended up with this. They ended up being evacuated back home. And the reason why this was so serious was because when they would look at the brains of the people in Cuba that were affected, they found brain damage, actual physical brain damage. They said the gray matter had changed. It looked like they had a concussion, but they didn't have any of the head trauma. So this was a very bizarre thing. They didn't know what this was. That's why they were accusing the Cuban government of attacking. And then these reports surface in China, and then more reports surface all over the world, in Poland, Russia, in Austria. Vienna, Austria actually has now more of the attacks have happened in Vienna, Austria than any other place in the world except for Cuba. So Cuba had about a little under 2 dozen, and Vienna's had a little more than a dozen attacks happening there. So these random Colombia, there's been attacks in Colombia, Taiwan, and the latest now happened in Vietnam. As Kamala Harris was set to arrive in Hanoi, it turned out that a couple of U.S. diplomats reported having been attacked with whatever this thing is that is attacking them. There were reports from CIA agents that were posted in parts of the world where they would be driving in their car and suddenly it would happen to them, that they would get this horrible sensation, this debilitating sound and feeling that would overcome them, and it would just potentially make them even crash their car into the side of the road. So what was also very strange about all these reports is that all of them happen while the diplomat or the CIA agent or the military personnel were in their homes or their hotel room. There was only a couple of instances where it happened when the person was driving their car. But all of the other incidences were pretty much when they were at home or in their hotel rooms. Then there were a couple of reports of these attacks happening inside of Washington, D.C. There was one staffer, White House staffer, that ended up getting the debilitating attack while she was out walking her dog. And then there was another one in the Ellison, I believe is what it's called. Is that I might have gotten that wrong. It's a lawn adjacent to the south, adjacent to just south of the White House. So these attacks happened outside. So the thing is that all of these experts have examined the data. They've looked and they've tried to figure out what sort of thing would cause this attack on these diplomats and CIA agents and military personnel, and who knows who else has been affected by these attacks. Alyssa Farah, who I've been co-hosting Rising with on the Hill, she said that she herself was potentially attacked here in America on U.S. soil. And what's really odd about it, the most odd, not only the brain damage is extremely odd, but beyond the brain damage, what's also extremely odd is that the people around these people, other people that are not military or not, U.S. diplomats or involved in the government, they didn't feel or hear anything. So it's very targeted. Only the people, the U.S. diplomats, the military, the CIA agents, they were the only ones who seemed to be affected. In some cases, other family members inside the house also were affected, but in most cases, they were not. So it's very targeted and very bizarre that only one person standing in in an apartment would feel and hear this horrible thing and have this brain damage and no one else around them would. So it's the most bizarre, intriguing case. And I did a radar on this on the Hill, and I read some of the comments on it. People were saying, "Oh, this is CIA propaganda." This, of course, this is their narrative. The thing is, the CIA is not giving us a narrative. We're not getting any information out of the White House, the Department of Defense, the CIA. They're not telling us anything. They're saying there's these events. They don't really classify them even as attacks. They say that these are events. They were calling them attacks, then they changed them to symptoms, and I think they do behind closed doors call them attacks again. But in public, they call them these like anomalous, events that are happening. And so they're not saying what they think it is. They're not making statements. There is no CIA narrative actually with this. That's what makes it so bizarre and so intriguing. There was a report done by, I believe it was GQ. It was Julia Einhoff from GQ. She had interviewed some people and they were saying maybe it was the Russians. But of course, that's what everybody was saying at the time. That was in 2018, 2019. There's, oh, it's the Russians. The Russians are doing this. So she said that there was some suspicion inside of the agency that potentially it was the Russians, that they were using some sort of a surveillance sort of mechanism that was making people sick. But that is not the narrative that is coming out of the intelligence community. That is not the narrative coming out of the Department of Defense. That is not the narrative coming out of the White House. They have no narrative. That's what's so bizarre about this. So Alyssa Farah did say that there was some classified information she was not able to disclose. So maybe they do have some sort of an idea of what is causing the brain damage, what is causing the debilitating sounds and dizziness and just smashing headaches that are able to target. My theory, if I had to theorize, right, because of course we're going to speculate, why not? It's a mystery. I speculate it is coming from their cell phone. So that would make sense. If you are walking your dog, you carry your cell phone with you. If you are in your hotel room, your cell phone is near you and it's not next door to you. If you are even in a house with family members, you might be in a room alone with your cell phone and they're in other rooms. And maybe if they're also feeling the effects, maybe at the time they're in the room with you with your cell phone. So the cell phone to me seems like there is some sort of technology that they're using to be able to get through whoever this is. And we don't know who it is. It could, I mean, who could it possibly be? I don't know what Russia, that the whole boogeyman of Russia is so bizarre to me because it's like, what do they're just trying to build their own country up at the moment. They're not competing on the world stage. If there was anybody who was going to do this, it would be China, right? That's kind of trying to, I suppose that would want to surveil US military intelligence and diplomats to find out what they're saying and what they're talking about and seeing if the US is planning anything against China or, why else would you want to surveil the United States? I just don't know if Russia has any real motivation because they're not exactly a power player like they were when they were the USSR back in the, 50s and 60s. So that to me, I have a hard time buying the Russia stuff. China's way more likely that they would be the ones that are using some strange, weird technology to surveil the cell phones that end up causing brain damage of some kind. But it could be a whole number of people, and who knows what scientist is out there working for some country or some organization. Maybe it's not a country at all. Maybe it's not a government at all. Maybe it's an individual, right? Who knows? When it comes to that, there's a lot of enemies of the United States for sure. There's a lot of people that even pretend to be friendly with the United States, but ultimately, are only being friendly because they feel like they have to. So there's a lot of possible people, a lot of motives that would be out there for this. But the speculation of what is causing this, I would say probably something coming through the cell phone. Are they intending it as a weapon? Is it a surveillance sort of mechanism? They're just trying to listen in. Unclear. It seems like it would be more surveillance, maybe, but it's clearly whether they're intending it or not, being weaponized because it's causing brain damage. So one of the reasons why also I don't think this is some sort of CIA narrative, like I said, for one, they don't have a narrative. So there's no narrative to go along with. But also because a lot of the Canadians, some of the people that have been affected in Canada, they're actually suing the Canadian government. They believe the Canadian government is covering up more cases. So there were a little over a dozen Canadians at the Cuban embassy who were affected. They have brain damage. They have hospital bills. They're debilitated in a lot of ways. They're not back. A lot of them are not back to normal health wise. And they were going after the Canadian government, trying to get some answers. And they are claiming that the Canadian government is hiding more victims. And now here in the United States, Congress passed the Havana Act that gives medical bills to those who are affected, the US diplomats, CIA, military. It gives them some relief money, some funds in order to deal with the side effects of these injuries. Some of them are lifelong for people. There was several of them have had to retire early because they just could no longer work. They're in so much pain. So it's a very, very bizarre story. And it's not, and another reason why, again, I don't think it's some weird CIA narrative is because it's not talked about at all in the news. They barely bring it up. It gets reported on. And then you never hear anything more really about this. And if it were a CIA narrative trying to demonize some country like Russia, they would be all over it. It would be blasted absolutely everywhere. And it's not. And that's what makes this even more intriguing. Now, I suppose it's a possibility that it's our own weapon, right? It's something the US is using to spy on its own people. That's a possibility as well, right? So it might not even be a foreign entity or, or some adversary of some sort. It could be internal. And the US government might have spyware that they're using on all of the diplomats, military personnel, and CIA agents to make sure that they're, not going to turn on the government or that they're not defecting to some other government or whatever, right? I mean, that is absolutely also a possibility, especially since it's only happening to US people, it seems. And I suppose some of the Canadians also were affected, which is a bit bizarre too. But Very, very intriguing mystery. So if there's more updates, now the 2 U.S. diplomats in Hanoi have been evacuated back to the U.S. Kamala Harris continued on her trip, but I know there's more they're not telling us. And we're not hearing much about this at all, but I will keep my eye out on this mystery. I'm sure there won't be any new information for quite some time, but it's just something to keep our eye on. It's very intriguing. I wonder what's happening. The Havana syndrome. Look it up. It's really, really bizarre. All of the cases, you can read about them. It's just really, really bizarre. One person was attacked suddenly, had this sensation and feeling and turned and looked at their son, and their son had a gushing nosebleed at the same time. So really bizarre stuff going on. Definitely read about it. Keep your eye on it. Interesting mystery. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to subscribe, hit that bell, make sure that you get all of the notifications. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me, kim@kimiverson.com. Be sure to join my locals community. That is where you get live streams. You also get behind the scenes looks at what's going on in my studio and in my life. And I also try to post some information that, just other information that I think is important for you guys all to have. And you get to also communicate with one another and interact with one another. It's a pretty cool place. That link is down below. Be sure to check it out. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more of my content, especially the uncensored kind, sign up for my Locals community. Locals is where we can freely discuss topics that are often censored or limited by big tech. Not only will you get bonus segments not seen on YouTube, but you'll also gain access to my casual behind-the-scenes live streams, informative postings stacked with valuable information, and even just random fun pics and videos from my personal life. It's a way to support my show while getting more content. It's $5 a month for premium access and free for others. So go to my Locals page at kimiverson.locals.com.